As a violinist, being either side, right? Afro-Latino, there are certain expectations of what kind of art you're going to make, especially when I was younger. We've done a lot of good work, my peers and I, to where I think those expectations are going away. But when I was coming up and in high school, it was strange that I was playing violin so many times where I was the only person in a concert hall or in a recital that was Black, and in some cases of color. And it was just weird. I was not really in the right space. I should have been doing something else. And I guess because of that, it kind of opened up the doors for me to consider, well, if I'm not completely welcome in this space as it is now, I need to make it into something that's more welcoming, which probably means breaking down a lot of the walls that are here. So I returned to the musical mother tongue that my parents had given me, which was all the music my dad was producing of like hip hop, dance, things with lots of synths and drum machines. And I figured I need to integrate this into my work and into the classical work that I've been doing. And if I can do that, not only will I be able to create an original sound for myself, which is always one of those big problems for a composer, right? Is like, do you make something that sounds new? But also I can figure out how to really integrate and stitch in my heritages as I had interacted with them, as I had interfaced with them into my work. And that's why now my pieces always have, I don't know, synths. If I feel like a certain section needs to be a house song, it's going to be a house song, and I'm not going to shy away from any of those sounds. I know enough of the history to know where an 808 should be placed and when to use the 808 cowbell versus using, I don't know, a drum and bass beat. You know, it feels more respectful to all the parts of myself that I was and that I am. And it feels like I'm not erasing anything for the sake of fitting into a certain genre that people expect should work a certain way for me. Living at the intersections of things is always extra nuanced because you kind of have to take in the rules of both societies, right? And figure out how to operate and maneuver those spaces. But being Latinx in San Antonio was much, there's a weird saying that there's like a brown privilege there because everyone is Mexican. Everyone's from Mexico. And my mom's from the DF, but my dad's Black. I think our family on my dad's side goes back to East Texas. And then who knows, right? Because of American history. Because even though there wasn't any judgment from other Latinos or other Black people in San Antonio, it was still like, I'm seeing you as one of these two things. There are like specific lenses I'm using to view you that didn't exist here in Brooklyn. But at the same time, it's kind of a double-edged sword because having those lenses on meant that whenever I did say, oh yeah, I'm Afro-Latino, or I know how to say these things, or I can pronounce these things correctly, / I know these stories and I want to tell these stories, I wasn't met with a moment of surprise or maybe, yeah, I guess I just didn't rock anyone's world by saying those things, which has happened a couple of times in Brooklyn, where people are like, oh, are you able to talk about that? And I was like, oh, yeah, I am, because that's what my household was. I'm not sure what this piece is called, but I know what it's about. I knew that it would be premiered here for the Latinx Abstract exhibit, and I wanted to just talk to my peers back in San Antonio and also some of them here in Brooklyn about their experience with maybe with the term Latinx or with their Latinidad, with like how that's felt, especially over the past 4 years. So I asked a couple questions, things like positive questions, like do you have a favorite memory associated with America? Or are there things about being American that actually make you really proud? But then also like more negative questions, like how do you think the general attitude of the country and also the people of America, how do you think that is towards Latinx people at the moment? Or are there any things that have made you really ashamed of our country? Because I don't know that anyone's interaction with our country is really one-dimensional. I mean, it's so many things at any given moment, and that's such a double-edged sword that I wanted to represent that. Also because I think a lot of us have hope for what the country could be. We want it to be a place where these problems aren't happening anymore. We understand that maybe our ancestors came here from countries recently super divided, because they wanted a better life. Or we understand that we've always been here and we wanted to return to the homeostasis that it was at before severe interruption by other cultures. And there are ways to work towards it, maybe. And also just, I feel like it would be good to ask the question, are you willing to work towards that? Knowing that the answer doesn't have to be yes. And if the answer is no, that's completely valid and understandable, because our country has done some hideous things. And in all of that, I also wanted to create something that felt, I don't know, in a way ancient, but at the same time extremely new. Just this thing of occupying both spaces, right? As we have for so long. It's like these old gods have existed for a really long time. These old cultures, these rituals have been here forever. But also there are those of us coming into this situation now and trying to make new art and respect the cultures that we're in now. So, I don't know, I wanted to make a piece that was just talking to people of the experience, about the experience. And this is what I came up with.
What are your thoughts on the American discovery? I think the word discover is kind of fitting.
I'd say that
It shows the
discovered because
culture
since we were kids,
that prevails after the arrival
technically discovered
these new people to this land.
was discovered in
Things
by
have been
Italian.
What are your thoughts on America?
with the people
Discovered.
whose land this was.
We start to think, we start to realize that
We might not be talking about discovery. We might be talking about these new people that are ahead. But the fact that we're using the word discovery shows how the people this land, this was
Discovered, I think it's pretty
treated.
so we're taking upon the European nations
because America was
of
thriving
the 1400s and
before
subsequently
the invasion of the Europeans.
with any
Or
other
what it is of them.
explorers.
I just think it's wrong to say it was discovered. Crocket, so it fights.
How it appears
Y peligroso para
slightly, not slightly.
So that's how I feel about it. I feel upset that we use the word discovered.
It goes to show the point.
You could say was that we interrupted
Discovery was tragedy, death,
America instead of discovery.
humiliation of discovery. So I have very good thoughts on America being quote-unquote discovered.
Next question.
What are your thoughts on governments that general houses
A treatment of Latinx people.
Creo que por lo general
in some places,
los latinos son
Latinx people are integrated
un tipo de respeto.
very well. That's something that I personally noticed
No se le da
after
todo
moving away from Texas, moving away from San Antonio to Philly, where there's not
ancestors proud?
And what made your ancestors proud of it, slash, most proud, or how did you end up there?
Proud of America.
Yeah, that's so many parts to this question. Well, what has made me proud of America? Probably,
Space in order to criticize publicly.
well, I think I grew up in Germany, so I did find it fascinating that everyone over there, or the children over there, were all obsessed with the U.S. and they thought it was like this.
Yeah, if anyone tells you anything about it.
I don't know, but one thing that I can say about America is that it does have huge cultural diversity. So there's that. I was brought up besides that,
Mi padre se
I
mudó
like that it's
para
diverse,
acá
but I think that a lot of people have
trabajo, pero sacar a mi canal y también para vivir. And I think that Americans were also proud of the fact that they could have their own
Latinx Abstract is understanding the pervasiveness of ourselves, understanding how far we've gone, how long we've been here, and how far-reaching our existence is, how embedded into everything it is. And I think I try to just figure out how can I represent those things for people in a way it's where not only do they enjoy coming into contact with what I am, but they also understand that they've always been in contact with it and therefore should respect it more. I for most of my life, my hair was shaved and really, really short. And when my hair is really short, I kind of look Filipino, much more Latino. And then when I turned 17, I hated haircuts, so I told my mom, I'm not going to cut my hair anymore. She's like, that's totally valid, have fun. And then I had an afro, much to my own surprise. And as of the moment that I had an afro, everyone started identifying me as Black and kind of excluding the Latino part of me. So I don't know, that was a strange thing to feel because at first it was like, oh, I'm part of everyone. And then once my hair was here and once I was visibly the mix that I am, people started to feel a bit differently about me, or at least like walking down the streets of the city was a different experience. And then moving up to New York, moving to Brooklyn, I don't know. I think everyone kind of understands that you're just going to see really different kinds of people here. There's an expectation of, I have no idea where you're from. I don't even know if you're going to be able to speak English or Russian or French, or I don't know what's going to come out of you, so I'm not expecting anything of you, which was kind of a nice pressure to have lifted.
Grapes covered in strength all of our days. Tears from the mouth, open we shout, what's this about? Who made the sea by purple leaves, holy is he, all of our days. Face my mistakes, never too late, love them away. Keeping it cool, close my like will got me really in school. All of that day, open night, wide alone, listening to what my body knows. What we had to do, and we share peace and stillness unto you.
My heritage means a lot to me, especially in the past few years. I've been diving deeper and deeper into my family's history, our ancestors' names. I've actually built a family tree and tracked down over 280 ancestors of mine, which has been an extremely powerful situation for me because I actually grew up in Queens, kind of separate from Puerto Rico. So I want to make that clear that I didn't grow up going back to the island, over and over again. And it's a very specific New Yorican experience that I'm living. My parents were both born in New York City. So when I was growing up, I always felt a bit removed from it because of that, but also because I'm a survivor of incest. And that is something that always separated me from my culture, from my family. I hardly ever wanted to hang out, with my family, and I never really saw the importance of it until I was able to heal from my experiences. Growing up, for me, I experienced my heritage through food, through family time, just hanging out with my mom, hearing stories. And I guess it's really hard to answer this because I feel assimilated. I feel like I'm very much a part of American culture. I guess for my music, I'm definitely influenced by this rhythm that we all have across the diaspora. And when you learn about the Middle Passage and how the drums came from Africa to the Caribbean, and then we have bamba, we have plena, we have all of these functional music genres in Puerto Rican culture that I kind of just imagine myself as someone, who maybe lived in the town and sang the news out as if I'm the newspaper, like when I think of my voice, I think of its function and its utility, and I feel like that comes from my Puerto Rican heritage and my African ancestors and their connection to music.
Blacked out from sunset again. I wanna feel what you feel. Swallow the weather inside. I wanna know if I'm real. We bathe the river. I don't hear it. I don't listen. I don't need no man's permission. Blacked out from sunset again. I wanna feel what you feel, 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 feel. Feel. I.
I've definitely been in situations with people in the music industry who asked me to play up my Latinx energy instead of my Black heritage. They're like, YouTube has a new head of Latin, like we should spice it up and get you in all those playlists. And I feel like it's weird to market your music and your artwork under this umbrella of identity. It's difficult for me because I don't want to be included just because I'm Latina or Black or a woman. I want my work to be the thing that is focused on, although I understand why it's important to put our voices up front because we have been historically marginalized and silenced and erased. But at the same time, I feel like my work is somehow non-derivative in a lot of ways. And I like to experiment with synthesizers and different instruments and just making a bunch of different sounds. So I think, at least within my process, I have always thought in a borderless capacity and never thought that I never felt being boxed in until I started to really sell my music and to perform and tour. Then it became this thing that, you know, is a tool for marketing, but I don't like that. I definitely feel comfortable expressing myself and my true ideas rather than wanting to fit a certain convention with things. Like, we've included drums in different ways on my record, like producing songs, but like using a traditional drum in a different way. Those are, like, that's an example of things I'm interested in. But no, I don't really feel constraints when it comes to that. I think it's interesting, the term Latinx. I understand its use. I think it's important to be gender neutral with everything in life. Like, I myself identify as gender nonconforming. So I see the functionality of the word, but at the same time, I also understand that only 23% of people who identify as Latino or Latina have heard of the term Latinx, and of those 6%, only of that 23, only 6% actually use the term to describe themselves, which I thought was a very interesting statistic. So I'm always being weary of, you know, how we talk about things online versus how things are actually playing out in the real world. I personally, you know, it's a lot of stress because when people, you know, call you Hispanic, call you Latina, I feel like it puts a lot of emphasis on our colonizers and their like presence in our culture, which is something I've lately been kind of divested from, like the idea of Latinidad. Like, I personally don't think it serves me to just be part of this unified thing, because it's like 20 plus countries, very different experiences, different colonizers, different history, all under one like label. And I feel like a lot of people's stories and experiences are erased that way, especially when we had all this talk around the election, like, oh, why did Latinos vote this way? I was like, well, maybe because a lot of Latinos are cool with white supremacy because they benefit from it. I think it's weird that the word Latinx is sometimes used to separate and say, yeah, I'm not Black, I'm not white, I'm Latinx. But it's an ethnicity, it's not a race. So I think it's actually weird to use it in some contexts because it just doesn't, it's not the right term yet. And I know that's kind of problematic and that it's an unpopular opinion, but as someone who's a descendant of this history, like, I want my story to be told, and I wish there was one word that summarized it all. But yeah, just been looking at different ways of identifying lately and reading a lot of other Caribbean voices and trying to understand where exactly my feelings come from, because I know I'm not the only person who's thinking, is this the way we should talk about ourselves and explain ourselves? I think about the way that we label music, Puerto Rican music, when we say, oh, that's Latin music. To me, like Puerto Rican music, that's American classics. That's American music because we influenced so much that is heard in American music history up until now. And I actually play separately in a band, in an orchestra, with my friend called Triunfadora, and we sing old Cuban and Puerto Rican classics as people who have English as our first language, getting back into our roots and into our heritage and saying, hey, this is American music, just like jazz is American music. This is us, you know? Colonization is something I think about a lot. It's something sometimes feels inescapable. Sadly, I used to focus on this idea that our mixed race was created for a workforce. I try not to focus on that, but it hurts so much still, just to know that that's how we were once viewed and seen, and to also know my ancestors who worked on a sugar plantation or a sugar farm in Puerto Rico. I think about that a lot. And as their descendant, I actually felt a lot of shame because I thought that by assimilating, it was like a dead flower wilting and becoming something that it will never be again and losing all of its life and culture and blood. And I felt so much shame to not speak fluent Spanish the best, you know, to live in America and have so much access and to have resources that people on the island do not have. But I very recently had some insight around that analogy. And instead of thinking of a dead, wilting flower, I've been thinking that I am a new thing existing in 2021, and I have the power to plant the seeds for the future. And my lineage will always be my lineage, and I will honor that with all of my might and all of my energy. But at the same time, I have to leave room for myself to be free. I have to leave room for myself to forge a new path, to be a girl from Queens, to be, you know, descendant of African, indigenous, Spanish people. Like, I want to be all of it. I don't want to be paralyzed by this idea that, you know, my ancestors would think I'm some American girl, you know, with just trying to give myself grace when it comes to that, because for so long I felt just terrible about not being connected in that way. Now I'm learning that I am who I am, and that is beautiful, and I can still be their descendant, and they can still be proud of me and still protect me, no matter what I think of myself.
I now slow down, waiting for my true thoughts to be found. Loop and heaven swear, you and I are broken, tinker there. With the spirit high, hug the perfect kind. Running strange, those pearl pink waves, bullets for a face, I know it well. I know this skin well. I've burned my soul, searching for a treasure that is found. Oh, you and I stay graceful and stay calm.
I started delving into punk probably like in 7th grade, thanks to Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, if you know that video game. I got into skateboarding, and that very quickly became the thing I did. And I started listening to different bands. I started listening to pretty entry-level punk bands like Green Day and Blink-182 and Sum 41. I really loved things like that. And eventually, I wanted to do that as well. So I asked my mom for a bass guitar in 8th grade, and I have been playing in bands ever since. As far as conflicts, in regards to my Latinx identity and what I do musically, there's not anything conflicting about it. I just happen to be a Latinx person that makes music, and that naturally just comes across, like my music has that identity. My ethnic identity doesn't really inform my musical choices or genre choices, but me being a Latinx person, my music is by default, it has that quality to it because I have that experience of living as a Latinx person. I think the Latinx term is great. I think it's very inclusive. Instead of Latino, Latina, it's very supportive of the binary, which as like a trans person, I'm not really about. Yeah, I think more words should be gender neutral. My grandparents are from Mexico. They immigrated like in the 1930s or something like that. It's been a long time since they've been in the US. And my mom grew up here. So my family's been here a while. And they would all say they're Latino or Latina. Their Latinx term is not really in their vocabulary. My mom is a little hipper, so she like knows about it, but probably doesn't use it. And then my peers or my friends, they all use it. We're just, I hang out in the punk scene, and there's a lot of like leftists, and I'm one of them. Like we try to be, inclusive of everyone, and use that kind of gender neutral terminology and respect people's pronouns and things like that. Reconnect was originally commissioned by the Pixis Quartet. So that commission came about, and they wanted me to play guitar on it. But because I was like teaching for the first time at NYU and I was writing the piece, I didn't actually want to be the guitarist on there. So the first recording of it has one of my best friends, Andrew, on it. Andrew Noseworthy. He's also a composer, a guitarist, and my bandmate. He lives in Canada. We met in grad school, but he played on that, and I wrote the part. We play in a hardcore band with a bunch of weird influences. I wrote him the part so that I would also be able to play it, so that when something like this came about, I could fill in, essentially. As far as influence for the piece, it's very like 15-year-old me is in there. Like all the like heavy drums and like angular rhythms and heavy kind of music, these different kind of punk genres kind of all meshing together. That's all stuff I listened to and like was revisiting during quarantine. So the kind of influence for the piece was this kind of revisiting of things I used to listen to in high school, and just sort of revisiting other punk records. Like I listen to like a lot of subgenres of punk. Like it's just like punk is just an umbrella term for everything I listen to. But yeah, like mallcore, mathcore, like screamo, I play in those kinds of bands. All that's kind of meshed into one piece. The title is really about reconnecting with some of it, Other stuff I continue to listen to, but like the intro, for example, is like a kind of something you'd hear out of like a mid 2000s band, like very scene band, something like that, right? And then it goes on to other stuff. Yeah, it's really just about friendship and things like that. Latinx Abstract is, I think, the freedom to do what you want as a Latinx person. So whether or not your identity comes across really kind of at the forefront of your art, I think that's totally valid. But I'm also a Latinx person that doesn't do that, and that I think that's valid as well. You know, I think there's a lot to be said, and a lot of art can be created that's that has that identity that's not maybe focused on the identity part so much.
It's what you shape.